A woman's body lay crumpled in the snow, blood freezing before it could pool. Lucas Reed dropped to his knees beside the wreckage, his hands already numb, his chest tight with a memory that wouldn't die. Sarah's crash. The call he got too late. The casket he couldn't look at. He'd sworn he'd never freeze again. Not when someone needed him. He pulled the stranger from the twisted metal, her pulse faint under his fingers, her lips already blue. The storm screamed around them. No signal, no road, no help. Just him, a dying woman, and a mountain that didn't forgive mistakes. If you want to see how far this story can go, hit like and drop your city in the comments. Now let me take you back to the beginning. Lucas Reed hadn't planned on being up the mountain that afternoon. He told his son Jamie he'd be back by 4 to help with his science project, something about volcano models and baking soda. But work had bled into the day the way it always did. Freelance graphic design meant deadlines didn't care about school pickups or bedtime stories. So when his sister Claire called and offered to grab Jamie from school, Lucas took the gift and did what he always did when the walls of his apartment felt too close. He drove. The mountain road was quiet this time of year. Most people avoided it once the weather reports started mentioning snow. But Lucas had grown up in these hills. He knew the curves, the overlooks, the spots where cell service flickered in and out like a bad light bulb. He wasn't afraid of a little cold. By the time he reached the scenic pullout near Crescent Ridge, the sky had turned the color of old bruises. Wind rattled the windows of his truck. He killed the engine and sat there for a minute, hands still on the wheel, staring at nothing. This was the spot. Not the exact spot. That had been 2 miles down, around a bend he still couldn't drive without holding his breath. But close enough that the memories came whether he wanted them or not. Sarah had been driving home from a conference. Late, tired. The roads were icy. No one's fault, the police said. Just bad luck. Lucas had gotten the call at midnight, and by the time he made it to the hospital, she was gone. Jamie had been 3. Too young to understand why mom wasn't coming home. Old enough to notice the way his dad stopped sleeping, stopped laughing, stopped being anything but functional. Lucas shook his head and shoved the door open. The wind hit him like a slap. He zipped his jacket up to his chin and stepped out onto the gravel, boots crunching in the thin layer of snow that had already started to gather. The forecast had mentioned flurries. Nothing serious, just enough to dust the pines and make the valley below look like a postcard. He walked to the edge of the pullout and looked down. Somewhere in the distance, he could see the faint glow of streetlights from the town. His town. The place he'd never managed to leave, even when staying felt like drowning. Claire kept telling him to move, start fresh somewhere new, find a woman who didn't know his baggage. But Lucas wasn't looking. Jamie was enough. Work was enough. Survival was enough. A sound pulled his attention, low and mechanical, growing louder. He turned and saw headlights cutting through the gray haze, coming up the road too fast. Way too fast. The SUV was silver, mid-sized and sliding. Lucas's stomach dropped. He'd seen this before. The wheels weren't gripping. The driver was braking too hard, jerking the wheel, making it worse. "Slow down," he muttered, even though no one could hear him. "Ease off the brake." The SUV fishtailed, overcorrected. The back end swung wide, clipped the guardrail with a metallic scream, and then the whole vehicle lurched sideways off the road. It didn't flip, just slid, heavy and helpless, into the embankment and down into the trees. The sound of impact was dull. Final. Lucas didn't think. He ran. His boots slipped on the icy asphalt, and he nearly went down, but he caught himself on the guardrail and kept moving. The wind was stronger now, sharp enough to sting his eyes, but he didn't stop. He reached the edge where the SUV had gone over and looked down. The vehicle was about 20 feet below, nose first in a snowdrift, rear wheels still visible. Steam hissed from the hood. One headlight flickered and died. "Hey!" Lucas shouted. His voice barely carried over the wind. "Can you hear me?" Nothing. He pulled out his phone. No signal. Of course. He shoved it back in his pocket and started down the slope, half sliding, half climbing, grabbing at roots and frozen brush to keep from falling. His hands were already numb. The temperature was dropping fast, and the snow was coming harder now, thick flakes that stuck to his jacket and melted into cold streaks. When he reached the SUV, he circled to the driver's side and looked through the window. A woman. Young. Maybe late 20s, dark hair stuck to her forehead, streaked with blood. Her eyes were closed. She wasn't moving. Hey! Lucas knocked on the glass. Can you hear me? Her head lolled slightly. A moan, barely audible. He tried the door. Locked. He pounded on the window. I'm going to get you out. Just hold on. He looked around, found a rock half buried in the snow, and slammed it against the window. It took 3 hits before the glass spiderwebbed, then shattered inward. He reached through, unlocked the door, and yanked it open. The smell hit him immediately. Gasoline and burnt rubber. Not good. The woman's seatbelt was still fastened. He leaned in, brushed the hair from her face. Her skin was cold. Her breathing was shallow but steady. Blood trickled from a gash above her left eyebrow, and her right arm hung at an awkward angle. Dislocated shoulder, maybe. Or broken collarbone. All right, Lucas said, mostly to himself. Let's go. He unclipped the seatbelt and slid one arm under her legs, the other behind her back. She weighed less than he expected. He lifted her out of the seat, and her head dropped against his chest. She made a sound, half gasp, half whimper. He held her tighter. Getting back up the slope was harder than coming down. His boots slipped with every step, and the snow was falling so thick now he could barely see the road. His arms burned, his lungs burned, but he kept moving, one step at a time, until he reached the guardrail and hauled them both over onto solid ground. He set her down carefully on the shoulder, shielding her from the wind with his body, and pulled out his phone again. Still no signal. He tried anyway, dialing 911 and waiting for the call to connect. It didn't. He swore under his breath and shoved the phone back in his pocket. The woman's eyes fluttered open. They were brown, wide, unfocused. Hey, Lucas said, leaning closer. Stay with me. What's your name? Her lips moved, but no sound came out. It's okay. Don't try to talk. You're going to be fine. Her eyes rolled back and she went limp again. Lucas looked around. The storm was getting worse. Visibility was maybe 10 feet now, and the wind was howling. His truck was parked 50 yards up the road, but even if he got her there, then what? Drive down the mountain in this? He'd seen what happened to people who tried. He'd buried one of them. There was another option, a bad option, but maybe the only one. He scooped the woman back into his arms and started walking, not toward his truck, but away from it, deeper into the hills. There was a cabin up here. He'd found it years ago, back when he used to take Jamie hiking. Abandoned, half-rotted, but it had 4 walls and a roof. It was a mile out, maybe less. He could make it. He had to. The snow was ankle-deep now, and every step felt like dragging weights. His jacket was soaked through. His hands were so cold he couldn't feel his fingers anymore. But the woman in his arms was colder. Her lips were turning blue. Her breathing was getting weaker. Come on, he muttered. Stay with me. The trees closed in around him, dark and silent, except for the wind. He kept his eyes on the ground, watching for roots and rocks, anything that could trip him. His legs were shaking. His vision was starting to blur. But then, through the white haze, he saw it, the cabin. Small, crooked, half buried in snow. The door was hanging off one hinge. Lucas stumbled forward, kicked the door open, and stepped inside. The air was just as cold as outside, but at least the wind couldn't reach them. He lowered the woman onto the floor as gently as his trembling arms would allow, and collapsed beside her. For a long moment, he just lay there, chest heaving, staring at the ceiling. Then he forced himself up. No time to rest. She was still in danger, hypothermia, shock, blood loss. He didn't know how bad the head wound was, but he knew it wasn't good. He shrugged off his jacket and draped it over her. Then he looked around the cabin. Bare walls, dirt floor, a broken table in the corner, a rusted stove that probably hadn't worked in 20 years. No firewood, no blankets, nothing. Lucas ran a hand through his wet hair and tried to think. His phone was useless. No one knew where he was. Claire would expect him to pick up Jamie by 7, and when he didn't answer, she'd worry. But she wouldn't think to look up here. Not in this storm. He checked the woman's pulse, still there. Weak, but there. Okay, he said aloud, just to hear a voice. Okay, we're going to figure this out. He pulled off his outer flannel shirt, folded it, and placed it under her head. Her eyes were moving beneath her lids now like she was dreaming, or trying to wake up. He didn't know which was better. Hey, he said softly, if you can hear me, I need you to hold on. Help's coming, I promise. He didn't know if that was true, but he said it anyway. The first hour was the worst. Lucas searched every inch of the cabin, looking for anything useful. He found a tin can filled with nails, a length of rope so rotted it fell apart in his hands, a tarp wedged behind the stove, torn but mostly dry. He spread the tarp over the woman and tucked it around her as best he could. Her breathing was shallow but steady. That was good. Her skin was still cold. That was bad. He crouched beside her and checked her injuries more carefully now. The head wound had stopped bleeding, but the gash was deep. She'd need stitches. Her right shoulder was swollen, and when he gently pressed it, she flinched even in unconsciousness. Definitely dislocated. He'd have to reset it eventually, but not yet. Not until she was awake enough to understand what was happening. Lucas stood and paced the small space, rubbing his arms. He was cold now too. His shirt was damp, and his jeans were stiff with ice. The temperature in the cabin was barely better than outside. If they stayed like this, they'd both be dead by morning. He looked at the stove again, useless without wood. But there was wood outside, fallen branches, dead wood under the snow. He could gather some. Build a fire. It wouldn't be much, but it might be enough. He glanced at the woman. She hadn't moved. "I'll be right back," he said, even though she couldn't hear him. He stepped outside and the cold hit him like a wall. The snow was knee-deep now, and the wind was so strong he had to lean into it just to stay upright. He waded to the nearest tree and started breaking off low branches. Most of them were wet, but a few were dry enough to burn. He gathered as many as he could carry and stumbled back to the cabin. Inside, he dropped the wood by the stove and tried to open it. The door was rusted shut. He kicked it, once, twice. On the third kick, it groaned and swung open, releasing a cloud of dust and old ash. He didn't have matches. He didn't have a lighter. But he had his phone, and phones had batteries. He pulled it out, pried open the back, and yanked the battery free. Then he tore a strip of fabric from the bottom of his shirt, wrapped it around the thinnest twigs, and used the battery terminals to create a spark. It took 6 tries. His fingers were so numb he could barely hold the wires steady. But finally, a small flame caught. He fed it carefully, adding twigs first, then larger branches, blowing gently to keep it alive. After what felt like forever, a weak fire flickered inside the stove. It wasn't much, but it was something. He closed the stove door part-way to trap the heat and sat back, watching the woman. The firelight barely reached her, but he could see her face now, young, pale, streaked with dirt and dried blood. Pretty, in a tired sort of way. She looked like someone who'd been running long before the crash. Lucas pulled his knees to his chest and stared at the flames. He thought about Jamie, about what his son would think when Dad didn't come home. Jamie was used to it by now, the late nights, the missed dinners, but this was different. This wasn't Lucas choosing work over family. This was Lucas maybe not coming back at all. He shook the thought away. He'd get them out. Somehow. The woman stirred. A soft groan escaped her lips. Lucas moved closer. "Hey, can you hear me?" Her eyes opened slowly, blinking against the dim light. She stared at the ceiling for a moment, then turned her head toward him. Her expression was blank, confused. "Where?" Her voice was barely a whisper. "You're safe," Lucas said quickly. "You crashed your car. I got you out. We're in a cabin because the storm's too bad to get down the mountain." She didn't respond right away. Just kept staring at him, like she was trying to decide if he was real. "Do you remember your name?" Lucas asked. A long pause. Then, "Elena." "Elena. Good. I'm Lucas." He shifted closer but kept his distance, not wanting to scare her. "Do you remember what happened?" Her eyes drifted shut. "I was driving." "Yeah, you were going pretty fast, hit some ice." "I didn't." She trailed off, grimacing. Her hand moved toward her head but stopped halfway. "Everything hurts." "You hit your head pretty hard. There's a cut above your eye, and I think your shoulder's dislocated." Elena's eyes snapped open. "Dislocated?" "Yeah, I haven't touched it yet. I wanted to wait until you were awake." She looked down at her shoulder, then back at him. "You're not a doctor." "No, just a guy who's seen too many survival videos." She almost smiled. Almost. "Great." Lucas gestured to the fire. "I got that going. It's not much, but it'll keep us from freezing, for now." Elena turned her head toward the flames, watching them flicker. "How long have I been out?" "Couple hours, maybe. It's hard to tell. And we're really stuck here." "Yeah, no signal. Road's a mess. The storm's not letting up. He paused. But we'll get out. Once the weather clears, I can get us down. I know these woods. Elena closed her eyes again. I should have stayed home. Lucas didn't know what to say to that, so he didn't say anything. He just sat there, listening to the wind howl outside, and hoped the fire would last through the night. An hour passed. Then another. Elena drifted in and out, sometimes muttering words Lucas couldn't make out, sometimes silent for so long he had to check her pulse just to make sure she was still breathing. The fire burned low, and Lucas went outside twice more to gather wood. Each trip was harder than the last. The cold was brutal now, cutting through his clothes like knives. His hands were cracked and bleeding by the time he came back the second time, and he couldn't stop shaking. Elena was awake when he returned. She watched him drop the wood by the stove, watched him blow on his hands and rub them together. You're going to freeze to death, she said quietly. Better than both of us freezing. That's stupid. Lucas looked at her. You got a better idea? She didn't answer. He fed the fire and sat down a few feet away from her, close enough to feel the heat, but not close enough to crowd her. For a while, neither of them spoke. The only sound was the crackle of the fire and the wind outside. Then Elena said, Why were you up here? Lucas glanced at her. What? On the mountain, in the middle of a storm. Why were you there? He looked back at the fire. I wasn't planning on being there that long. I just needed to clear my head. From what? Lucas hesitated. He didn't talk about this. Not with Claire. Not with anyone. But something about sitting in a freezing cabin with a stranger made it easier. My wife died 3 years ago, he said. Car accident. Same road you crashed on. Elena's expression softened. I'm sorry. Yeah, me too. Is that why you go up there? To think about her? I guess. I don't know. It's complicated. Elena shifted slightly, wincing as her shoulder moved. Complicated how? Lucas ran a hand through his hair. She was a good person, a good mom, and I miss her, but I don't know. I'm angry, I think. At her for leaving, at myself for not being there, at the whole damn world for not stopping it. That's not complicated, Elena said. That's just grief. Lucas looked at her. You sound like you know something about it. Elena's gaze drifted to the fire. My mom died when I was 16. Cancer. It took 2 years, and by the end, she didn't even look like herself anymore. She paused. I was angry too. Are you still? Sometimes, but mostly I'm just tired. Lucas nodded. He understood that. They sat in silence for a while. Then Elena spoke again, her voice quieter now. I was running. Lucas frowned. From what? Everything. My job. My ex. My life. She looked at him. I thought if I just drove far enough, I could leave it all behind. Start over somewhere new. Did it work? She laughed, but there was no humor in it. What do you think? Lucas didn't answer. He just stared at the fire and thought about all the things people ran from and how none of them ever really disappeared. The night deepened. The temperature dropped. Lucas kept the fire going, but the wood was running low and he knew he'd have to go out again soon. He didn't want to. His body was screaming at him to stop, to rest, but rest meant freezing, and freezing meant dying. Elena was shivering now, even under the tarp and his jacket. Her teeth were chattering. Cold, she whispered. Lucas moved closer. I know. I'm doing everything I can. It's not enough. She was right. The fire wasn't enough. The tarp wasn't enough. They needed more heat, and there was only one way to get it. Elena, Lucas said carefully, we need to share body heat. She looked at him, her eyes glassy. What? It's the only way to keep warm. We need to stay close, really close. Elena stared at him for a long moment. You mean like, together? Yeah. She didn't answer right away. Lucas could see the hesitation in her face, the distrust. He didn't blame her. She didn't know him. For all she knew, he could be anyone. I know this is weird, Lucas said, but I'm not trying anything. I'm just trying to keep us both alive. Elena's jaw tightened. Then, slowly, she nodded. Okay. Lucas moved beside her and carefully wrapped his arms around her, pulling her against his chest. She was stiff at first, tense, her good hand pressed against his ribs like she was ready to push him away. but after a minute she relaxed. Her head dropped onto his shoulder and her breathing evened out. "Thank you," she whispered. Lucas didn't respond. He just held her, feeling the steady rise and fall of her chest, and stared at the dying fire. Somewhere around midnight, Elena started talking. "My ex's name was David," she said quietly. "We were together for 4 years, engaged for 6 months. Lucas didn't know if she was talking to him or just talking, but he didn't interrupt. He was perfect on paper," she continued. "Good job, good family. Everyone loved him. But he was also controlling, little things at first, telling me what to wear, who I could see, then bigger things, where I worked, where I lived." She paused. "I didn't realize it was happening until I looked up one day and didn't recognize my own life." "When did you leave?" Lucas asked. 2 months ago. I packed a bag while he was at work and just left. I've been staying with friends, moving around, trying to figure out what to do next." She looked up at him. "That's why I was driving up here. I needed space. Time to think. And instead you crashed into a snowbank." "Yeah." Elena let out a shaky breath. "Story of my life." Lucas tightened his hold on her. "You're still here. That's something." She didn't respond, just closed her eyes and let herself rest against him. Lucas watched the fire burn down to embers. He thought about Sarah, about Jamie, about how easy it was to lose everything in a single moment. And he thought about Elena, broken, running, barely holding on, and how much she reminded him of himself. The first light of dawn crept through the cracks in the cabin walls. The storm hadn't stopped, but it had eased. The wind was quieter now, and the snow was falling in slow, lazy flakes instead of the blinding wall it had been the night before. Elena stirred in Lucas's arms. She opened her eyes and looked up at him. "You didn't sleep," she said. "Couldn't. You should have woken me. You needed it more than I did." Elena pulled away slowly, wincing as her shoulder moved. She sat up and looked around the cabin, taking it in properly for the first time. "This place is a disaster." "Yeah, but it kept us alive." She looked at him, her expression softer than it had been. "You kept us alive." Lucas shook his head. "I just did what anyone would do." "No, you didn't." Elena held his gaze. "Most people would have driven past, or called 911 and left. You didn't. You stayed." Lucas didn't know what to say to that, so he just nodded and stood up, stretching his stiff legs. "We need to talk about your shoulder." Elena's face paled. "Now?" "The longer we wait, the worse it's going to get. If it swells too much, I won't be able to fix it." She closed her eyes and took a deep breath. "Okay, do it." Lucas knelt beside her and gently touched her shoulder. She flinched but didn't pull away. "This is going to hurt," he said. "I know." He counted to 3 in his head. Then he pulled. Elena screamed. The sound echoed through the cabin, sharp and raw, and then stopped just as suddenly as it started. She slumped forward, gasping, and Lucas caught her. "It's done," he said. "You're okay." Elena was shaking, not from the cold this time. Tears streamed down her face. "I'm not okay." Lucas held her until the shaking stopped. Then he eased her back against the wall and checked the shoulder. It was back in place, but the swelling was already starting. He tore another strip from his shirt and fashioned a makeshift sling. "Keep it still," he said, "and don't try to move it." Elena nodded, her face pale and wet with tears. Lucas stood and walked to the window. The snow was still falling, but lighter now. He could see farther than he had the night before. Maybe 100 feet. Maybe more. "If the weather keeps clearing, we can try to get down this afternoon," he said. Elena didn't respond. Lucas turned back to her. She was staring at the fire, her expression distant. "Elena." She looked up. "We're going to make it," Lucas said. "I promise." She didn't look convinced, but she nodded anyway. The rest of the morning passed slowly. Lucas went out one more time to gather wood, and when he came back, Elena was sitting up, looking stronger. The color had returned to her face, and her eyes were clearer. "How are you feeling?" Lucas asked. "Like I got hit by a truck," she said. "But better than yesterday." Lucas smiled. "That's progress." He fed the fire and sat down beside her. For a while they just sat there, watching the flames, not talking. It was a comfortable silence. The kind you only get with someone who's been through something with you. Then Elena spoke. What's your son's name? Lucas looked at her, surprised. Jamie. How old is he? 6. Does he look like you? Lucas thought about it. A little. He's got his mom's eyes, though. Elena smiled. I bet he misses you. Yeah, I bet he does. They sat in silence again. Then Elena said, Thank you for everything. Lucas shook his head. You don't have to thank me. Yes, I do. She looked at him, her eyes serious. You saved my life, and you didn't have to. Lucas didn't know what to say to that, so he just nodded. Outside, the wind had stopped. The snow was falling lighter now, barely more than a dusting. Lucas stood and looked out the window. The sky was still gray, but there was a break in the clouds to the east. Light was filtering through. Come on, he said. We're getting out of here. Elena stood slowly, testing her legs. She was unsteady, but she could walk. Lucas helped her to the door and pushed it open. The cold air rushed in, but it didn't feel as brutal as it had the night before. He stepped outside and looked around. The snow was deep, but the path back to the road was visible now. He could do this. He turned back to Elena. Stay close to me, and if you need to stop, tell me. She nodded. They started walking, slowly, carefully. Lucas led the way, breaking a path through the snow, and Elena followed, one step at a time. It was hard. Her shoulder was killing her, and every step felt like dragging weights, but she kept moving. After what felt like forever, they reached the road. Lucas's truck was still there, covered in snow but intact. He brushed off the windshield and helped Elena into the passenger seat. Then he climbed in, started the engine, and pulled onto the road. The drive down was slow. The road was still icy, and visibility was poor. But Lucas knew these curves. He'd driven them 1,000 times. And this time, he wasn't going to crash. They reached the town just as the sun broke through the clouds. Lucas pulled into the hospital parking lot and helped Elena inside. The nurses rushed over, asking questions, checking her vitals. Lucas stepped back and let them work. A doctor appeared and pulled Elena onto a gurney. She looked back at Lucas, her eyes wide. Wait, she said. I don't even know your last name. Lucas smiled. Reed. Lucas Reed. Elena Cross. The doctor wheeled her away and Lucas stood there, watching until she disappeared through a set of double doors. Then he turned and walked out into the cold morning air. He pulled out his phone. 3 missed calls from Claire. He called her back. Lucas? Her voice was frantic. Where the hell have you been? It's a long story, Lucas said. Is Jamie okay? He's fine. He's here with me. But you scared the crap out of me. I know. I'm sorry. I'll explain everything when I get there. He hung up and climbed back into his truck. As he drove toward Claire's house, he thought about Elena, about the cabin, about the night they'd survived together, and he wondered if he'd ever see her again. He didn't think so. People like her didn't come back. They moved on, started over, forgot. But as he pulled into Claire's driveway and saw Jamie's face light up in the window, Lucas realized something. He didn't need her to come back. He'd done what he needed to do. He'd saved a life. And maybe, in the process, he'd started saving his own. Jamie's hug nearly knocked Lucas off his feet. Dad! The boy's arms locked around his waist, face pressed into his stomach. Aunt Claire said you got stuck in the snow. Lucas knelt down and pulled his son close, breathing in the smell of grape juice and the cheap shampoo Claire bought in bulk. Yeah, buddy, I did. But I'm okay now. Were you scared? Lucas thought about the cabin, the cold, Elena's blue lips. A little, but I'm home now. Claire stood in the doorway, arms crossed, her expression somewhere between relief and fury. She waited until Jamie ran back inside to grab his backpack before she spoke. A little? Her voice was low, tight. Lucas, you were gone all night, in a blizzard. I called you 17 times. I know. No signal doesn't cover 17 missed calls. Claire, and then you show up looking like you crawled out of a freezer, and all you say is, it's a long story? She stepped closer, lowering her voice even more. What the hell happened up there? Lucas rubbed his face. He was exhausted. Every muscle in his body ached. His hands were still cracked and raw. There was an accident. A woman crashed her car. I got her out, but the storm was too bad to get down, so we had to wait it out in that old cabin I showed you once. Claire's anger faltered. The one past Crescent Ridge? Yeah. Is she okay? I don't know. They took her when we got to the hospital. Head injury, dislocated shoulder. Maybe worse. Claire studied his face. Then she sighed and pulled him into a hug. You're an idiot. I know. But you're a good idiot. Lucas almost smiled. Almost. They went inside. Jamie was already at the kitchen table, volcano model half finished, baking soda container tipped over. Lucas sat down beside him and helped glue the painted cardboard, listening to his son chatter about his day, about the substitute teacher who let them watch a movie, about the kid in his class who ate a crayon on a dare. Normal. Safe. Home. But Lucas's mind kept drifting back to the cabin, to Elena's face in the firelight, to the way she'd looked at him when the nurses wheeled her away, like she was trying to memorize him before he disappeared. He shook it off. She was fine now. That was all that mattered. 3 days passed. Lucas fell back into routine. Work, school pickup, dinner, bedtime stories. He didn't think about the mountain. He didn't think about Elena. Or at least he tried not to. But on the 4th day, his phone rang. Unknown number. He almost didn't answer. Then something made him pick up. Hello? Is this Lucas Reed? The voice was unfamiliar, professional. Yeah, who's this? My name is Dr. Patel. I'm calling from Mercy General. You brought a patient in a few days ago. Elena Cross? Lucas's chest tightened. Is she okay? She's stable. Recovering well, actually, but she's been asking for you. Lucas didn't know what to say to that. She'd like to see you, Dr. Patel continued, if you're available. Lucas looked around his apartment, dishes in the sink, laundry piled on the couch, Jamie's toys scattered across the floor. When? Visiting hours are until 8 tonight. Lucas checked the time, 4:30. He could make it. Okay, I'll be there. He called Claire, asked if she could watch Jamie for a couple hours. She didn't ask questions, just said yes. Lucas grabbed his keys and headed out. The hospital was 20 minutes away. Lucas spent the drive trying to figure out what he was going to say. Thanks for not dying? Glad you're okay? It all sounded wrong. He didn't even know why she wanted to see him. Probably just to say thanks, closure. Then they'd go their separate ways. He parked and walked through the sliding glass doors. The smell hit him immediately. Antiseptic and bleach, and something else he couldn't name. He hated hospitals. Hadn't been in one since Sarah. The receptionist directed him to the 3rd floor. Room 312. Lucas took the elevator, his heart beating faster than it should. When the doors opened, he stepped out into a long hallway, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. He found the room and knocked. Come in. He pushed the door open. Elena was sitting up in bed, her right arm in a sling, a bandage across her forehead. She looked better than the last time he'd seen her, color in her face, eyes clear. She smiled when she saw him. You came. Lucas stepped inside, suddenly aware of how out of place he felt. Dr. Patel said you wanted to see me. I did. Elena gestured to the chair beside the bed. Sit, please. Lucas sat. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Elena said, They told me I had a concussion, dislocated shoulder, mild hypothermia. Apparently I'm lucky to be alive. You are. Because of you. Lucas shook his head. I just did what anyone would have done. Elena's expression shifted. No, you didn't. The doctor said if I'd been out there another hour, I would have died. She paused. You carried me a mile through a blizzard. You kept a fire going all night. You reset my shoulder without anesthesia. Her voice cracked slightly. You saved my life, Lucas. Lucas didn't know what to say. He looked down at his hands. I don't know how to thank you, Elena continued. I don't even know where to start. You don't have to thank me. Yes, I do. She leaned forward slightly, wincing as her shoulder moved. I need you to understand something. When I crashed, I wasn't just running from David. I was running from everything, my job, my family, myself. I was so tired of feeling trapped that I thought if I just kept driving, I'd find a way out. She looked at him. But I didn't. I just ended up freezing to death in a ditch, and then you showed up. Lucas met her eyes. I'm glad I did. Elena smiled, a real smile this time. Me too. They talked for a while after that. Small things. Surface things. Elena told him about her job, marketing for some tech company in the city. Lucas told her about freelance design work, about Jamie, about the science project that still wasn't finished. It was easy, comfortable, like picking up a conversation they'd started days ago and never really stopped. Then a nurse came in to check Elena's vitals, and Lucas stood. I should go, let you rest. Elena's face fell slightly. Okay. Lucas hesitated at the door, then he turned back. If you need anything, I know. Elena reached for the notepad on the table beside her bed and scribbled something down. She tore off the page and held it out. My number, in case you ever want to check in. Lucas took the paper and folded it into his pocket. Get some rest, Elena. You too, Lucas. He left the hospital feeling lighter than he had in days. He didn't know why. Nothing had changed, but something felt different. A week went by. Lucas didn't call. He told himself it was because she needed space, time to heal. But the truth was, he didn't know what to say. What was there to say? Thanks for not dying felt hollow. Let's stay in touch felt presumptuous. So he said nothing. Then, on a Tuesday afternoon, his phone buzzed. Text message. Unknown number. Hey, it's Elena. I got discharged today. Just wanted to let you know I'm okay. Lucas stared at the screen. Then he typed back. That's great. Glad to hear it. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Would it be weird if I asked to see you again? Lucas's heart skipped. He didn't know why. He typed back quickly before he could overthink it. No, not weird. Good. Coffee? Lucas looked at the time. Jamie was at school. He had 2 hours before pickup. When? Now? Lucas hesitated. Then he typed, where? Elena sent an address. A cafe downtown. Lucas knew the place. He'd taken Sarah there once, years ago. He pushed the memory aside and grabbed his keys. The cafe was small, tucked between a bookstore and a dry cleaner. Lucas walked in and spotted Elena immediately. She was sitting by the window, her arms still in a sling, a mug of something steaming in front of her. She looked up when he walked in, and her face lit up. You came. You asked. Elena gestured to the seat across from her. Lucas sat down. A waitress appeared, and he ordered coffee. Black. No sugar. How's the shoulder? Lucas asked. Sore, but healing. Elena rotated it slightly, testing the range of motion. Doctor said I should be out of the sling in a couple weeks. That's good? Yeah. Elena took a sip of her drink. How's your son? Good. Finally finished that volcano project. Elena smiled. Did it explode? All over the kitchen table. They both laughed. It felt natural, easy. Then Elena's expression grew more serious. I wanted to see you because I've been thinking a lot about that night, about what you said in the cabin. Lucas frowned. What did I say? That you were angry, at your wife, at yourself, at everything. Elena looked down at her mug. I've been angry too, for a long time. At David, at my job, at the fact that I let my life get so small. She paused. But that night, when I thought I was going to die, I realized something. The thing I was most angry about was myself. For not leaving sooner. For not fighting back. Lucas didn't interrupt. He just listened. And then you showed up, Elena continued. And you didn't ask questions. You didn't judge me. You just helped. And I think that's the first time in years someone's done something for me without expecting anything in return. She looked at him. So thank you. Not just for saving my life, but for reminding me that not everyone's like David. Lucas felt something tighten in his chest. You don't have to thank me for that. I know, but I want to. They sat in silence for a moment. Then Lucas said, What are you going to do now? Elena shrugged. I don't know. I can't go back to my apartment. David still has a key, and I can't keep crashing with friends forever. She stirred her drink. I guess I'll figure it out. You staying in town? For now. Maybe. I don't know. Lucas hesitated. Then he said, If you need help finding a place, I know some people. Landlords, real estate agents. Elena looked at him, surprised. "You'd do that?" "Yeah, why not?" She smiled. "Okay, thank you." They finished their coffee and talked about small things, movies, books, the weather. When Lucas checked his phone and realized he had to pick up Jamie, Elena walked him to the door. "This was nice," she said. "Yeah, it was." Elena hesitated, then said, "Can we do it again sometime?" Lucas nodded. "Yeah, I'd like that." As he drove to Jamie's school, Lucas realized he was smiling. He didn't know why. Nothing had happened. But something had shifted, something small, and for the first time in a long time, he didn't feel like he was just surviving. 2 weeks passed. Lucas and Elena texted occasionally. Nothing deep, just small updates. She'd found a new apartment. He'd landed a big client. Jamie lost a tooth. She tried a new coffee place and hated it. Then one Saturday, Elena texted him, "I'm moving into my new place today. Want to help?" Lucas looked at Jamie, who was watching cartoons on the couch. He could bring him along. Make it quick. "Sure, what time?" "Noon." Lucas showed up at 11:50 with Jamie in tow. The apartment was small, 1 bedroom, barely furnished, but it was hers. Elena greeted them at the door, looking tired but happy. "You brought reinforcements," she said, smiling at Jamie. Jamie looked up at her, suddenly shy. "I'm Jamie." "I'm Elena. Your dad's told me about you." Jamie glanced at Lucas, then back at Elena. "Did you really crash your car?" "Jamie," Lucas started, but Elena laughed. "I did, and your dad saved my life." Jamie's eyes went wide. "Really? Really?" Jamie looked at his dad with something like awe. Lucas felt his face heat. "Come on, let's get these boxes inside." They spent the next 2 hours hauling furniture and unpacking. Jamie helped carry the light stuff, pillows, blankets, small boxes. Elena directed traffic, telling them where everything went. It was chaotic and messy and exhausting, but it was also kind of fun. When they finished, Elena ordered pizza. They sat on the floor of her empty living room, eating straight from the box, and Jamie chattered nonstop about school, about his friends, about the new video game he wanted. Elena listened, smiling, asking questions. She was good with kids, natural. Lucas watched them interact and felt something warm settle in his chest. After they finished eating, Jamie fell asleep on the couch. Lucas covered him with a blanket and sat down on the floor beside Elena. "Thank you for today," she said quietly. "You already thanked me." "I know, but I mean it." She looked at him. "I don't have a lot of people I can count on. It means a lot that you showed up." Lucas didn't know what to say, so he just nodded. Elena leaned back against the wall, staring at the ceiling. "I called David yesterday." Lucas's stomach tightened. "Why?" "To tell him to stay away, that I didn't want to hear from him again." She paused. "He didn't take it well." "What did he say?" "That I was making a mistake, that I'd come crawling back." Elena's jaw tightened. "He always said things like that, like I couldn't survive without him." "But you are." Elena looked at him. "Yeah, I am." They sat in silence for a while. Then Elena said, "Can I ask you something?" "Sure." "Do you ever think about dating again?" Lucas blinked. "What?" "I mean, it's been 3 years since your wife died. Have you thought about it?" Lucas looked away. "Not really." "Why not?" "Because I have Jamie and work, and that's enough." Elena didn't look convinced. "Is it?" Lucas didn't answer. Elena shifted closer. "I'm not trying to push. I'm just saying you're allowed to move on. You know that, right?" Lucas stared at the floor. "I know." But he didn't, not really, because moving on felt like forgetting, and forgetting felt like betrayal. Elena seemed to sense his discomfort because she changed the subject. They talked about other things, her new job search, his latest design project, the weird neighbor she'd met in the hallway, and slowly the tension eased. When Jamie woke up, Lucas said they should go. Elena walked them to the door. "Thanks again," she said, "for everything." "Anytime." Elena looked at Jamie. "It was nice meeting you," Jamie smiled. "You too." As they walked to the car, Jamie said, "I like her." Lucas glanced down at his son. Yeah? Yeah, she's nice, and she laughs at my jokes. Lucas smiled. She does, doesn't she? Jamie climbed into the back seat and buckled himself in. Then he said, Dad? Yeah? Do you like her? Lucas froze. What? Elena, do you like her? Lucas started the car, buying himself time. She's a friend, buddy. But do you like her? Lucas didn't know how to answer that, because the truth was, he didn't know. Elena was something. But what? He couldn't name. She's nice, Lucas said finally, and I'm glad we helped her today. Jamie seemed satisfied with that answer. He went back to looking out the window, humming some song from school. But Lucas couldn't stop thinking about the question. Do you like her? It shouldn't have been complicated, but it was, because liking someone meant opening a door he'd locked 3 years ago, and he didn't know if he was ready for that. Another week passed. Lucas tried to focus on work, on Jamie, on the daily grind, but Elena kept creeping into his thoughts. The way she laughed, the way she listened, the way she looked at him like he wasn't broken. Then one night his phone rang, late, almost 11. Lucas was in bed, half asleep, when he saw her name on the screen. Hello? Lucas? Her voice was shaky, scared. Lucas sat up. Elena? What's wrong? He's here. Who? David. He's outside my apartment. He won't leave. Lucas was already pulling on his jeans. Did you call the police? I did. They said they'd send someone, but it's been 20 minutes and no one's here. I'm on my way. Lucas grabbed his keys and ran out the door. Claire was at his apartment. He'd called her earlier to watch Jamie while he worked late. He didn't explain, just told her he'd be back soon. The drive to Elena's apartment took 15 minutes. Lucas broke at least 3 traffic laws getting there. When he pulled up, he saw a man standing outside the building. Tall, well-dressed, pacing. Lucas parked and got out. David? The man turned. Who the hell are you? A friend. Elena called me. David's expression darkened. She called you? Of course she did. She's probably in there crying about how terrible I am. Lucas stepped closer. You need to leave. I'm not going anywhere until I talk to her. She doesn't want to talk to you. David laughed. And who are you to decide that? Lucas didn't answer. He just stood there, blocking the entrance. David took a step forward. Move. No. For a moment, Lucas thought David was going to swing, but then headlights cut across the parking lot. A police car pulled up, and 2 officers got out. Someone called about a disturbance, one of them said. David's face went red. This is ridiculous. I'm just trying to talk to my fiancé. Ex-fiancé, Lucas said. The officer looked at David. Sir, if the resident doesn't want you here, you need to leave. David glared at Lucas. Then finally he turned and walked away. The officers watched him get into his car and drive off before they came over to Lucas. You the one who called? One of them asked. No, the woman inside did. Elena Cross, 3rd floor. The officer nodded. We'll go check on her, make sure she's okay. Lucas waited outside while they went up. 10 minutes later, they came back down. She's fine, the officer said. Shaken up, but fine. We advised her to file for a restraining order. Lucas nodded. Thanks. The officers left and Lucas stood there for a moment staring at the building. Then he pulled out his phone and texted Elena. You okay? 3 dots appeared almost immediately. Yeah, thank you. Want me to come up? A pause. Then, yes. Lucas took the stairs 2 at a time. When he reached her door, it was already open. Elena was standing in the doorway, her face pale, her eyes red. Hey, Lucas said softly. Hey. He stepped inside and Elena closed the door behind him. For a moment, they just stood there. Then Elena's face crumpled and she started to cry. Lucas pulled her into his arms. She buried her face in his chest, her body shaking. He held her, one hand on her back, the other in her hair, and didn't say anything. He just let her cry. When she finally pulled away, her face was blotchy and wet. I'm sorry. Don't be. I shouldn't have called you. Elena, stop. Lucas looked at her. I'm glad you called. I'm glad I was here. She wiped her eyes. He scares me. I know. What if he comes back? Then you call the police again. And you call me. Elena looked up at him. her eyes searching his. Why are you doing this? Because you need help. But why do you care? Lucas didn't have an answer. Or maybe he did, but he didn't know how to say it. Because you remind me what it's like to care about someone. Because you make me feel like I'm not just surviving. Because when I'm with you, I don't feel so alone. But he didn't say any of that. He just said, because I do. Elena stared at him for a long moment. Then she stepped closer and wrapped her arms around him. Lucas held her, feeling the warmth of her body against his, and realized something. He wasn't just helping her anymore. He was falling for her. And that scared him more than anything. Lucas stood outside Elena's apartment until the sun came up, long after the police had driven away, long after David's taillights had disappeared into the night. He didn't trust that it was over, didn't trust that David wouldn't circle back the moment Lucas left. So he stayed, leaning against his truck, watching the windows, making sure she was safe. When his phone buzzed at 6 a.m, he expected it to be Claire asking where he was. Instead, it was Elena. Are you still out there? Lucas looked up at her window. He could see her silhouette behind the curtain. Yeah. You didn't have to stay all night. I know. A pause, then, come up, please. Lucas locked his truck and climbed the stairs. Elena was waiting in the doorway, wrapped in a blanket, her hair messy from a night of not sleeping. She looked exhausted, fragile, but also relieved. Thank you, she said quietly. Lucas stepped inside. You don't have to keep thanking me. I know, but I need you to understand what it means, that you stayed. Elena's voice cracked. David used to tell me no one would ever care about me the way he did, that if I left him, I'd be alone. She looked at Lucas. And then you show up, every single time, like it's the easiest thing in the world. Lucas's chest tightened. It is easy, because I care about you. Elena's eyes filled with tears. She didn't say anything, just stepped forward and wrapped her arms around him. Lucas held her, feeling the way her body shook with silent sobs, and he realized something. This wasn't just about protecting her from David. This was about showing her that she was worth protecting, that she deserved to be cared for, that she wasn't alone. They stood there for a long time. Then Elena pulled back, wiping her eyes. You need to go home. Jamie's probably wondering where you are. I called Claire. She's got him. Lucas, I'm not leaving until I know you're okay. Elena looked at him, something shifting in her expression. I'm okay. Or I will be. Then I'll stay until you are. Elena almost smiled. You're stubborn. Yeah, so I've been told. They moved to the couch. Lucas made coffee while Elena showered, and when she came back out, she looked more like herself. They sat in silence for a while, sipping coffee, not needing to fill the quiet with words. Then Elena said, I filed the restraining order paperwork this morning. Court dates next week. Good. That's good. The officer said it'll probably get approved. There's enough evidence. Elena stared into her mug. But that doesn't stop him from showing up again. If he does, you call me. Immediately. Elena looked at him. Why are you doing this? I already told you. No, I mean really. Why? Her voice was soft but insistent. You have your own life, your own problems. You don't owe me anything. Lucas set his mug down. You're right, I don't owe you anything, but that's not why I'm here. Then why? Lucas met her eyes. Because when I look at you, I see someone fighting to rebuild her life. And I know what that's like. I know how hard it is. And I know what it feels like to do it alone. He paused. So if I can make it even a little bit easier for you, I'm going to. Elena's expression softened. You're a good person, Lucas Reed. I'm just a person. No, you're more than that. Elena reached for his hand. And I don't know what I did to deserve you showing up that day on the mountain, but I'm grateful. Lucas squeezed her hand. Me too. They sat there, hands intertwined, and Lucas felt something settle in his chest, something that felt like peace, or maybe hope. He wasn't sure which, but it was something he hadn't felt in a long time. The next few days passed in a strange kind of limbo. Elena went to work. Her new remote job had started, and she threw herself into it like a lifeline. Lucas worked from home, keeping his phone close, checking in with her every few hours. Jamie asked questions Lucas didn't know how to answer. Why are you texting so much? Why do you look worried? Is Elena okay? Lucas tried to keep it simple. Elena's dealing with some stuff. She needs a friend right now. And Jamie seemed to accept that, though Lucas could see the concern in his son's eyes. On Wednesday, Elena's court date arrived. Lucas offered to go with her, but she insisted on going alone. I need to do this myself, she'd said. And Lucas understood. So he waited, worked, tried to focus, failed miserably. When his phone rang at 2 in the afternoon, he nearly dropped it answering. It's done, Elena said. Her voice was steady but tired. Restraining order approved. He can't come within 500 feet of me. Lucas exhaled. That's great, Elena. Yeah, it is. A pause. Can I see you tonight? Of course. You want to come here? I'll make dinner. I'd like that. Elena arrived at 6:30 with a bottle of wine and a tired smile. Jamie greeted her enthusiastically, showing her his latest drawing, a dinosaur fighting a robot. Elena admired it seriously, asking questions about the robot's weapons and the dinosaur's strategy. Jamie beamed. Over dinner, spaghetti that Lucas only slightly overcooked, they talked about small things. Jamie's upcoming field trip, Elena's new coworkers, the weird neighbor who kept leaving notes about recycling. It felt normal, safe, like they were building something that could withstand the chaos outside. After Jamie went to bed, Lucas and Elena sat on the couch with the wine. Elena curled into the corner, her legs tucked under her, looking more relaxed than Lucas had seen her in weeks. This is nice, she said. Yeah? Yeah, it feels like home. She looked around the small apartment, the mismatched furniture, the toys scattered on the floor, the drawings taped to the fridge. Not like a perfect home, just a real one. Lucas smiled. That's what it is. Real. Elena took a sip of wine. Can I tell you something? Always. I've been thinking about what you said, about rebuilding. She set her glass down. And I realized I've been so focused on running away from David that I haven't thought about what I'm running toward. What do you want to run toward? Elena was quiet for a moment. I don't know. A life that feels like mine. A job I actually care about. People who see me as more than just David's ex-fiancée. She looked at Lucas. You. Lucas's heart skipped. Me? Yeah, you. Elena shifted closer. I know this is complicated. I know you have Jamie and you're still dealing with losing Sarah. And I'm still a mess from David. But when I'm with you, I feel like maybe I'm not as broken as I thought. Lucas didn't know what to say, so he reached for her hand. You're not broken. Feel like I am sometimes. We're all a little broken. That doesn't mean we can't put ourselves back together. Elena looked at their joined hands. Is that what we're doing? Putting ourselves back together? Maybe. Or maybe we're just figuring out how to be okay with the cracks. Elena smiled, and it reached her eyes this time. I like that. They sat in comfortable silence, and Lucas felt the weight of the past few weeks begin to lift. David was still out there. The restraining order was just paper. But Elena was here, safe, and that was something. The following week brought a fragile kind of normalcy. Elena came over for dinner twice more. Lucas helped her set up a home office in her apartment. Jamie started asking when Elena would visit again before she'd even left. And slowly, carefully, they began to build something that felt like a relationship. But the past had a way of showing up uninvited. It was a Friday night when Lucas got the call. Not from Elena this time, but from Detective Morris. Mr. Reed, I wanted to give you a heads up. David Brennan posted bail this afternoon. Lucas's blood ran cold. I thought he was being held. He was, but his lawyer argued he wasn't a flight risk. Judge set bail at $50,000. His family posted it. So he's out. As of 4 o'clock, we've notified Ms. Cross, but I wanted to make sure you knew too, given your involvement. Lucas was already grabbing his keys. Thanks for letting me know. He called Elena. It went to voicemail. He tried again. Nothing. His heart was pounding now, his hands shaking as he dialed a third time. On the fourth ring, she picked up. Lucas? Where are you? At home. Why? David made bail. He's out. Silence. Then, when? This afternoon. Oh. Her voice was small, scared. I'm coming over. You don't have to eat. I'm already in the car. Lucas called Claire on the way, asked her to come stay with Jamie. She didn't ask questions, Just said she'd be there in 10 minutes. Lucas drove faster than he should have, his mind racing. David was out. The restraining order meant nothing if he decided to ignore it, and men like David didn't like being told no. When Lucas pulled up to Elena's apartment, everything looked normal. No cars that didn't belong, no signs of trouble, but his gut told him something was wrong. He took the stairs 2 at a time and knocked on Elena's door. She opened it immediately, like she'd been waiting by the entrance. Her face was pale, her hands trembling. "He hasn't shown up," she said quickly, "but I keep thinking he will." Lucas stepped inside and locked the door behind him. "Have you heard from him?" "No, but that's almost worse. At least when he was texting, I knew where his head was at." Lucas looked around the apartment. Everything was in place. But Elena was right. The silence was worse. "Okay," Lucas said. "Here's what we're going to do. You're going to pack a bag, enough for a few days, and you're going to stay at my place." Elena blinked. "What?" "Just until we know he's not going to try anything. You'll be safer there." "Lucas, I can't just move into your apartment. It's not moving in. It's staying safe." Lucas looked at her. "Please, I need to know you're okay." Elena stared at him for a long moment. Then she nodded. "Okay." She packed quickly. Clothes, toiletries, her laptop. Lucas watched the street from the window, every passing car making his shoulders tense. When Elena was ready, they left together, Lucas walking close enough that their shoulders almost touched. The drive back was quiet. Elena stared out the window, her hands folded in her lap. Lucas wanted to say something reassuring, but he didn't know what, so he just drove. When they arrived, Claire was in the living room with Jamie, watching a movie. She took one look at Elena's face and stood. "I'll get the spare room ready," Claire said. Jamie looked between them, confused. "Is Elena sleeping over?" Lucas knelt down. "Yeah, buddy, just for a little while." "Like a sleepover?" "Kind of." Jamie's face lit up. "Cool! Can we make pancakes in the morning?" Elena managed a smile. "Sure, Jamie. We can make pancakes." Claire showed Elena to the spare room, really just a storage space with a futon, and helped her get settled. Lucas thanked his sister, promised to explain later, and sent her home. Then he checked every lock in the apartment twice before sitting down on the couch. Elena emerged a few minutes later, wearing sweatpants and one of Lucas's old hoodies that she must have borrowed. She looked younger like this, vulnerable. "Jamie's asleep?" she asked. "Out cold." Elena sat beside him, pulling her knees to her chest. "I'm sorry for dragging you into this." "You didn't drag me into anything. I walked in on my own." "Still, this is a lot." Lucas turned to face her. "Elena, listen to me. You don't have to apologize for needing help. You don't have to apologize for being scared. And you definitely don't have to apologize for being here." Elena's eyes filled with tears. "I just feel like such a burden." "You're not a burden. You're someone I care about who's going through something hard. There's a difference." "Is there?" "Yeah, there is." Lucas reached for her hand. "And I need you to believe that." Elena looked at their joined hands, then back at his face. "Why are you so good to me?" "Because you deserve it." Elena's tears spilled over. She didn't try to hide them this time. Just let them fall, her body shaking with the force of everything she'd been holding in. Lucas pulled her into his arms, and she buried her face in his chest, her fingers clutching his shirt. "I'm so tired," she whispered. "I'm so tired of being scared." "I know. I just want it to be over." "It will be. I promise." Elena held onto him like he was the only solid thing in a world that kept shifting, and Lucas held her back, wishing he could take away her pain, knowing he couldn't, but determined to be there while she fought through it. They stayed like that for a long time. When Elena finally pulled back, her eyes were red and swollen, but there was something different in her expression, something like resolve. "Thank you," she said. "You don't have to—" "I know, but I'm going to anyway." She wiped her eyes. "Thank you for not making me go through this alone." Lucas brushed a strand of hair from her face. "You're not alone. Not anymore." Elena looked at him, really looked at him, and Lucas felt something shift between them, something deeper than friendship, something that scared him and thrilled him in equal measure. "Lucas," Elena said softly. "Yeah? I think I'm falling for you." Lucas's breath caught. He'd known, on some level, that this was happening. had felt it building every time they were together, but hearing her say it out loud made it real, made it something he couldn't ignore. "I think I'm falling for you too," he said quietly. Elena's eyes searched his face. "Is that okay?" "I don't know, but I think I want to find out." Elena smiled, a real smile, fragile but genuine. "Me too." Lucas leaned forward slowly, giving her time to pull away. But she didn't. She met him halfway, and when their lips touched, it felt like coming home. The kiss was soft and tentative, neither of them rushing, both of them savoring the moment. When they pulled apart, Elena rested her forehead against his. "I'm still scared." "Me too. But I don't want to run anymore." "Then don't." Lucas pulled her closer. "We'll figure it out, together." Elena nodded, and they sat there, wrapped in each other, the rest of the world fading away. Outside, the night was dark and uncertain. David was still out there. The fear hadn't disappeared, but for the first time in a long time, neither of them felt alone. And that made all the difference. The next morning, Jamie woke them up at 7, demanding pancakes as promised. Elena laughed, her face still creased from sleep, and followed him to the kitchen. Lucas watched them work together, Jamie cracking eggs, Elena measuring flour, both of them covered in batter by the time the first pancake hit the pan. It felt right, natural, like this was how it was always supposed to be. After breakfast, while Jamie watched cartoons, Lucas and Elena sat on the back porch with coffee. The morning was cool and clear, the kind of day that made you forget winter was coming. "I've been thinking," Elena said. "About what?" "About what happens next." She looked at him. "With us." Lucas took a sip of coffee, buying himself time. "What do you want to happen?" "I want to see where this goes, but I also don't want to rush anything, for Jamie's sake, and ours." "I agree," Elena smiled. "Good. So we take it slow." "Slow? I can do slow." "Can you?" Elena raised an eyebrow. "Because you drove across town at midnight to check on me." Lucas laughed. "Okay, slowish." "Slowish I can work with." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the world wake up around them. And Lucas realized something. This, Elena, Jamie, this life they were building was worth fighting for, worth the fear, worth the risk. Because sometimes the best things come from the worst moments. Sometimes you have to lose everything to find what really matters. And sometimes the person who saves you is the one who needs saving just as much. Lucas looked at Elena, and she looked back, and in that moment he knew they were going to be okay. Not perfect, not without struggles, but okay. And that was enough. Lucas didn't let go right away. He stood there in Elena's apartment holding her, feeling the way her breathing gradually steadied against his chest. The clock on her microwave read 11:47. He should go. Claire was waiting. Jamie would wake up asking questions if he came home too late. But Elena's grip on his shirt hadn't loosened, and Lucas couldn't bring himself to pull away. When she finally stepped back, her eyes were puffy and tired. "I'm a mess." "You're not." "I am." She wiped at her face with the back of her hand. "I can't even stand up to my ex without falling apart." "You did stand up to him. You called the police. You got him to leave." "You got him to leave." Lucas shook his head. "He was already going. I just made sure he didn't change his mind." Elena looked at him for a long moment. Then she walked to the couch and sat down heavily. Lucas followed, keeping a careful distance between them. "I don't know what I am doing," Elena said quietly. "I left him because I thought I could start over, be someone different. But I'm still the same person, still scared, still weak." "You're not weak." "Then why does it feel like that?" Lucas leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "Because leaving someone like David doesn't fix everything overnight. It just means you're not stuck anymore. The rest takes time." Elena turned to look at him. "How long did it take you?" "What?" "To not feel stuck after your wife died." Lucas exhaled slowly. "I don't know if I'm there yet." Elena's expression softened. "But you're trying." "I guess." They sat in silence for a while. The apartment was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator and the occasional sound of footsteps from the unit above. Then Elena said, "Can I ask you something?" "Sure." "Why did you come tonight?" Lucas frowned. "You called me." I know. But you could have just told me to wait for the police. You didn't have to drive over here. Lucas didn't answer right away. He didn't know how to put it into words without sounding like he was confessing something he wasn't ready to admit. I guess I didn't want you to be alone. Elena studied his face. Is that all? Lucas's chest tightened. What do you mean? I mean, Elena hesitated. Do you feel it too? Feel what? This. She gestured between them. Whatever this is. Lucas looked away. His heart was pounding now, and he hated how exposed he felt. Elena, I'm not asking you to say anything, she said quickly. I just need to know if I'm imagining it. Lucas rubbed the back of his neck. You're not imagining it. Elena let out a breath. Okay. But I don't know what to do about it, Lucas added. I have Jamie, and you're still dealing with David. And I haven't been with anyone since Sarah. He looked at her. I don't even know if I remember how. Elena's lips twitched into a sad smile. I don't think there's a right way to do this. Then what do we do? I don't know. She shifted closer, just slightly, but I don't want to pretend it's not there. Lucas met her eyes. They were brown and tired and full of something he couldn't name. He wanted to reach for her. He wanted to close the distance and see what happened. But he also wanted to run. Because this was real. And real meant risk. And risk meant he could lose again. I should go, Lucas said finally. Claire's with Jamie. Elena nodded, but the disappointment in her face was obvious. Okay. Lucas stood and walked to the door. He paused with his hand on the knob. Lock this behind me, and call me if David shows up again. I will. He left without looking back. The drive home was quiet. Too quiet. Lucas turned on the radio just to fill the silence, but the music felt hollow. When he got back to his apartment, Claire was asleep on the couch. He woke her gently, thanked her, and sent her home. Then he checked on Jamie, who was curled up in bed, clutching his stuffed dinosaur. Lucas stood in the doorway for a long time, just watching his son sleep. This was his life. Simple. Safe. Predictable. And until a few weeks ago, it had been enough. Now he wasn't so sure. The next morning, Lucas woke up to a text from Elena. Restraining order filed. Court date is next week. Thanks for everything last night. Lucas typed back. Good. Let me know if you need anything. 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. Can I see you this week? Maybe grab lunch? Lucas stared at the message. He should say no. Put some distance between them. Give himself time to think. But instead he typed, yeah. When? Thursday? Thursday works. He set the phone down and stared at the ceiling. What was he doing? He didn't have time for this. Didn't have space in his life for someone else. But every time he thought about pulling back, he remembered the way Elena had looked at him in her apartment. Like he was the only solid thing in a world that kept shifting. Thursday came faster than Lucas expected. He met Elena at a small diner near the edge of town. She was already there when he arrived, sitting in a booth by the window, her arm out of the sling now, but still moving carefully. Hey, Lucas said, sliding into the seat across from her. Hey, Elena smiled. You look tired. Thanks. I didn't mean it like that. I know. Lucas picked up the menu even though he already knew what he was going to order. How's the shoulder? Better. Physical therapy's helping. Elena set her menu down. How's Jamie? Good. He asked about you yesterday. Elena's face brightened. Really? Yeah. Wanted to know when you were coming over again. And what did you tell him? Lucas hesitated. That I didn't know. Elena's smile faltered. Oh. It's not... Lucas stopped. I just don't want him getting attached if this isn't going anywhere. And is it? Going anywhere? Lucas didn't know how to answer that. The waitress appeared before he had to, taking their orders and disappearing again. When they were alone, Elena leaned forward. Lucas, I need you to be honest with me. About what? About this. About us. She paused. Because I'm trying really hard not to read into things, but it's confusing. 1 minute you're showing up at my apartment in the middle of the night, and the next you're pulling away. Lucas looked down at the table. I'm not trying to confuse you. Then what are you trying to do? I don't know. Lucas met her eyes. I like you, Elena. I do. But I don't know if I'm ready for this. Elena's expression softened. Ready for what? For someone new? For letting someone in? He paused. Sarah was my whole world, and when she died, it felt like someone ripped out half of who I was. I spent 3 years trying to put myself back together, and I'm still not sure I did it right. He looked at her. I don't know if I have room for you, and I don't want to hurt you by trying and failing. Elena was quiet for a long time. Then she said, What if you don't fail? What if I do? Then we deal with it. Elena reached across the table and put her hand over his. Lucas, I'm not asking you to have all the answers. I'm just asking you to try. Lucas stared at their hands. Hers was small and warm, and it fit against his in a way that felt both foreign and familiar. What if Jamie gets hurt? Then we'll make sure he doesn't. Elena's grip tightened. I'm not trying to replace his mom. I would never do that. But I care about him, and I care about you, and I think maybe that's enough to start with. Lucas wanted to argue, wanted to list all the reasons this was a bad idea. But when he looked at Elena, really looked at her, all he saw was someone who was just as scared as he was. And maybe that was the point. Maybe they didn't have to have it all figured out. Maybe they just had to be willing to try. Okay, Lucas said quietly. Elena blinked. Okay? Yeah, let's try. Elena's face broke into a smile. Not a polite smile or a careful one, but a real unguarded smile that made Lucas's chest ache. Okay. Their food arrived, and they ate and talked about small things. Jamie's school play, Elena's job interviews, the weather. It felt normal, easy. And for the first time in a long time, Lucas didn't feel like he was pretending. When they finished, Lucas walked Elena to her car. She turned to face him, her expression uncertain. So what now? She asked. I don't know. Dinner sometime? With Jamie? Lucas hesitated. Then he nodded. Yeah, with Jamie. Elena's smile returned. I'd like that. Lucas watched her drive away, then got into his own car and sat there for a moment. He didn't know if this was the right decision, but it was a decision, and that was something. The next week passed in a blur. Lucas told Jamie they were having dinner with Elena on Saturday, and his son spent the entire week asking questions. What's her favorite color? Does she like dinosaurs? Can we show her my volcano? Lucas answered as best he could, but the truth was, he was just as nervous as Jamie. Saturday came. Elena arrived at 6, holding a bag of groceries. Lucas had offered to cook, but she insisted on helping. Jamie answered the door and immediately launched into a detailed explanation of his latest Lego project. Elena listened, nodding seriously, asking questions like she actually cared. Lucas watched from the kitchen, chopping vegetables for the stir-fry, and felt something settle in his chest. This could work. Maybe. Dinner was chaotic. Jamie spilled his juice twice, and the rice burned slightly, but no one seemed to care. Elena told stories about growing up with 2 older brothers, and Jamie laughed so hard he almost fell out of his chair. Lucas found himself relaxing, laughing along, forgetting to worry. After dinner, Jamie dragged Elena to his room to show her his collection of action figures. Lucas cleaned up the kitchen, listening to their voices drift down the hallway. When they came back, Jamie was holding Elena's hand. Dad, can Elena read me a bedtime story? Lucas glanced at Elena. She looked uncertain, but willing. If that's okay with your dad. Lucas nodded. Yeah, that's fine. Jamie picked out a book, something about dragons and knights, and climbed into bed. Elena sat on the edge of the mattress and started reading, using different voices for each character. Jamie giggled, his eyes wide. Lucas stood in the doorway, watching, and felt his throat tighten. When the story ended, Jamie yawned. Will you come back? Elena looked at Lucas, then back at Jamie. Do you want me to? Yeah. Then I will. Jamie smiled and closed his eyes. Elena stood and followed Lucas out of the room, closing the door softly behind her. They walked back to the living room. Lucas didn't know what to say. Elena seemed to sense his discomfort because she said, He's a great kid. Yeah, he is. He looks like you. Lucas smiled. Everyone says that. Elena hesitated. Then she said, Thank you for letting me be here tonight. Thank you for coming. They stood there, the air between them heavy with something unspoken. Then Elena stepped closer. Can I ask you something? Sure. Are you still scared? Lucas thought about it. Yeah, but less than before. Elena reached up and touched his face, her hand warm against his cheek. Me too. Lucas closed his eyes. He wanted to kiss her, wanted to pull her close and stop thinking about all the ways this could go wrong. But he also wanted to be careful. For Jamie, for himself, for her. So instead he just leaned into her touch and said, I'm glad you're here. Elena smiled. Me too. She left a little while later, and Lucas stood on the porch, watching her taillights disappear down the street. When he went back inside, Jamie was sitting on the couch, rubbing his eyes. Dad? Hey, buddy, I thought you were asleep. I was, but I woke up. Jamie looked at him. Do you like Elena? Lucas sat down beside his son. Yeah, I do. Like? Lucas almost laughed. Yeah, like. Jamie was quiet for a moment. Then he said, I like her too. Lucas pulled his son into a hug. Good. That's good. They sat there for a while, just the two of them, and Lucas felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. The weeks that followed were easier. Elena came over for dinner once a week, sometimes twice. She and Jamie built Lego sets together. She helped Lucas with a design project that was driving him crazy, and slowly, carefully, she became part of their lives. It wasn't perfect. There were moments when Lucas pulled back, when the guilt crept in and he wondered if he was betraying Sarah's memory. And there were moments when Elena got quiet, when the shadow of David lingered and she struggled to believe this was real. But they talked through it, fumbled through it, and somehow they made it work. One night, after Jamie had gone to bed, Lucas and Elena sat on the couch, a movie playing in the background that neither of them was watching. Elena's head was on his shoulder, her hand resting on his chest. Can I tell you something? She said quietly. Always. I used to think I was broken, that David had taken something from me I'd never get back. She paused. But being with you, it doesn't feel like that anymore. Lucas tightened his arm around her. You were never broken. Maybe. But I felt like it. She looked up at him. And now I don't. Lucas didn't know what to say, so he just kissed the top of her head and held her closer. But the peace didn't last. It was a Tuesday when Lucas got the call. He was at his desk working on a logo design when his phone rang. Unknown number. He almost didn't answer. Then something made him pick up. Hello? Is this Lucas Reed? The voice was unfamiliar, male, professional. Yeah, who's this? My name is Detective Morris. I'm calling about Elena Cross. Lucas's stomach dropped. What happened? Is she okay? She's fine, but we need to talk. Can you come down to the station? Lucas was already grabbing his keys. I'm on my way. He called Claire, asked her to pick up Jamie from school, and drove to the police station. His mind was racing. What happened? Did David do something? Was Elena hurt? When he arrived, Detective Morris was waiting for him in the lobby. He was tall, gray-haired, with the kind of face that had seen too much. Mr. Reed, thanks for coming. What's going on? Let's talk in my office. Lucas followed him down a hallway and into a small room. Detective Morris gestured to a chair, and Lucas sat. Elena's ex-fiancé, David Brennan, was arrested this morning, the detective said. Lucas's chest tightened. For what? Violating the restraining order. He showed up at her apartment last night, tried to force his way in. Lucas's hands clenched into fists. Is she okay? She's shaken up, but physically fine. She called 911, and we got there before he could do any real damage. The detective leaned forward. But here's the thing. Brennan's been making threats, saying he's not done, that she's going to regret leaving him. So arrest him. We did, but his lawyer's already working on bail. He'll be out by tomorrow. Lucas stood. Then what the hell am I supposed to do? Keep an eye on her. Make sure she's not alone. And if he shows up again, call us immediately. Lucas didn't wait for more. He left the station and drove straight to Elena's apartment. She opened the door before he could knock, her face pale and drawn. You talked to the police, she said. Yeah. She stepped aside, letting him in. The apartment looked the same, but there was a tension in the air that hadn't been there before. Elena sat on the couch, pulling her knees to her chest. He tried to break down the door, she said quietly. I heard him yelling, saying I was his, that I couldn't just walk away. Lucas sat beside her. He's not going to hurt you. You don't know that. Yes, I do, because I'm not going to let him. Elena looked at him, her eyes filled with tears. I'm scared, Lucas. I know. He pulled her into his arms. But you're not alone. You hear me? You're not alone. Elena buried her face in his chest, and Lucas held her, feeling the way her body shook. He didn't know how to fix this, didn't know how to make her feel safe, but he knew one thing. He wasn't going anywhere. The next day, David made bail. Elena got a call from the prosecutor's office, warning her to be vigilant. Lucas moved a bag of clothes into her apartment and told Jamie he'd be staying there for a few nights. Jamie didn't understand, but Claire did. She promised to keep him as long as needed. Lucas spent the nights on Elena's couch, sleeping in short bursts, listening for any sound that didn't belong. Elena tried to tell him he didn't have to, but Lucas wouldn't hear it. I'm staying, he said simply. End of discussion. 3 days passed, then 4. David didn't show. But the waiting was its own kind of torture. Elena barely slept. Lucas watched her move through her apartment like a ghost, jumping at every sound. On the 5th night, Lucas found her sitting on the floor of her bedroom, her back against the wall, staring at nothing. Hey, he said softly, sitting down beside her. Elena didn't respond. Talk to me. She shook her head. I can't do this anymore. Can't do what? This. Waiting for him to show up, waiting for something terrible to happen. She looked at him, her eyes red. I thought leaving him would make me free. But I'm not. I'm just trapped in a different way. Lucas took her hand. You're not trapped. Then why does it feel like that? Lucas didn't have an answer, so he just held her hand and stayed with her until the sun came up. The breakthrough came on the 6th day. Detective Morris called and said they'd found evidence that David had been stalking Elena for weeks. Photos, emails, texts to mutual friends asking about her whereabouts. It was enough to press additional charges, enough to keep him locked up longer. When Lucas told Elena, she cried, not out of fear this time, but relief. It's over? She asked. Not over, but better. Elena collapsed into his arms, and Lucas held her, feeling the weight of the past week lift just slightly. They weren't out of the woods yet, but they were closer. That night, Lucas went back to his apartment to see Jamie. His son ran to him, wrapping his arms around his waist. I missed you, Dad. I missed you too, buddy. Jamie pulled back and looked up at him. Is Elena okay? Lucas knelt down. Yeah, she's okay now. Good. Jamie paused. I was worried. Lucas pulled his son into another hug. Me too. Later, after Jamie went to bed, Claire cornered Lucas in the kitchen. You're in love with her, she said. Lucas froze. What? Elena. You're in love with her. Claire. Don't deny it. I've seen the way you look at her, the way you dropped everything to protect her. Claire crossed her arms. So, are you going to tell her, or are you going to keep pretending you're just friends? Lucas rubbed his face. It's complicated. It's always complicated. That doesn't mean it's not real. Lucas didn't respond. Because Claire was right, and that scared him more than anything David could do. Lucas didn't sleep that night. He lay in bed staring at the ceiling, Claire's words circling in his head like vultures. You're in love with her. He wanted to deny it, wanted to argue that it was too soon, too complicated, too much. But the truth sat heavy in his chest, and no amount of reasoning could make it lighter. He was in love with Elena Cross. The realization didn't come with fireworks or clarity. It came with fear. Because loving someone meant risking everything again. It meant opening himself up to the kind of loss that had nearly destroyed him 3 years ago. And he didn't know if he was strong enough to survive it a second time. But he also knew he couldn't walk away. Not now. Not after everything. The next morning, Lucas dropped Jamie at school and drove to Elena's apartment. She opened the door, looking better than she had in days, showered, dressed, a hint of color back in her cheeks. Hey, she said, stepping aside to let him in. Hey. Elena closed the door and leaned against it. I've been thinking. About what? About us. She crossed her arms, not defensively, but like she was holding herself together. About what happens next. Lucas's stomach tightened. Okay, David's in custody. The restraining order's been extended. The prosecutor says he'll probably plead out to avoid trial. She paused. I'm safe now, or as safe as I'm going to be. Lucas nodded slowly. That's good. It is. Elena looked at him. But I don't want you to feel like you have to keep taking care of me. Lucas frowned. What are you talking about? I mean, you've done so much. You saved my life. You've protected me. You've been there for me when no one else was. Her voice cracked slightly. But I don't want you to stay out of obligation. Lucas stepped closer. Is that what you think this is? I don't know what this is. Elena, I'm serious, Lucas. She looked up at him, her eyes bright with unshed tears. I need to know if you're here because you want to be or because you feel like you have to be. Lucas stared at her. He could feel his heart pounding, could feel the weight of the words he'd been holding back pressing against his ribs. He'd spent 3 years building walls around himself, telling himself it was safer that way. But Elena had walked through every single one without even trying. I'm here because I want to be, Lucas said quietly. Elena's breath hitched. Really? Yeah. Lucas reached for her hand. I'm here because I can't imagine not being here. Because every time I think about walking away, it feels like losing something I didn't even know I needed. He paused. I'm here because I love you. The words hung in the air between them, raw and exposed. Elena stared at him, her mouth slightly open, like she couldn't quite believe what she'd heard. You love me? She whispered. Yeah, I do. Elena's eyes filled with tears, but she was smiling. I love you too. Lucas pulled her into his arms, and she buried her face in his chest. They stood there for a long time, holding each other, not saying anything, because there was nothing left to say. The truth was out, and it was terrifying and beautiful, and everything Lucas had been too scared to let himself want. When they finally pulled apart, Elena wiped her eyes and laughed. I wasn't expecting you to say that. Neither was I. So what now? Lucas thought about it. I don't know, but I think we figure it out together. Elena nodded. Together. I like that. They spent the rest of the morning talking, really talking, about what they wanted. Elena admitted she didn't know where she'd be in 6 months, but she wanted Lucas in whatever came next. Lucas told her about his fears, about Jamie, about the guilt he still carried. And Elena listened without judgment, without trying to fix him, just accepting him as he was. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. And that was enough. The weeks that followed were quieter. David's case moved through the system slowly but surely. He took a plea deal, 18 months, with probation after. It wasn't as long as Elena had hoped, but it was something. And more importantly, it gave her space to breathe. Lucas and Elena fell into a rhythm. Dinners at his apartment with Jamie. Weekends at the park. Movie nights where they'd fall asleep on the couch before the credits rolled. Jamie adored her. He'd started calling her by her first name without hesitation, and sometimes he'd ask if she could come to his school events. Lucas always checked with Elena first, and she always said yes. One Saturday in early spring, they took Jamie hiking. Not up the mountain where Lucas had found Elena, he wasn't ready for that yet, but a smaller trail near the lake. Jamie ran ahead, pointing out birds and rocks and sticks shaped like swords. Elena walked beside Lucas, her hand in his, her face tilted toward the sun. This is nice, she said. Yeah, it is. I never thought I'd be the hiking type. Lucas smiled. You're doing fine. I'm out of breath. That's because Jamie set the pace. Elena laughed. Up ahead, Jamie was crouched by a fallen log, inspecting something. Lucas called out, What'd you find, buddy? Mushrooms, big ones. Don't touch them. Jamie straightened and ran back toward them. Can we eat them? No? Why not? Because they'll probably kill you. Jamie considered this seriously. Then he shrugged and ran off again. Elena looked at Lucas. He's got your sense of adventure. And Sarah's curiosity. Lucas's voice softened. She would have loved this. Elena squeezed his hand. I wish I could have met her. She would have liked you. You think? Yeah, she always said I needed someone who'd call me on my crap. Lucas glanced at Elena. You do that pretty well. Elena grinned. It's a gift. They walked in comfortable silence for a while. Then Jamie ran back again, this time holding a pine cone. Elena, look! Elena knelt down to his level. Wow, that's a good one. You can keep it. Really? Jamie nodded. For your collection. Elena looked at Lucas, confused. Lucas shrugged. He thinks everyone collects pine cones. Elena looked back at Jamie. Well, I do now. Thank you. Jamie beamed and ran off again. Elena stood, holding the pine cone carefully, and Lucas felt something swell in his chest. This moment, this life, was more than he'd ever thought he'd have again. And he didn't want to take a second of it for granted. That night, after they'd put Jamie to bed, Lucas and Elena sat on the back porch, sharing a blanket. The air was cool but not cold, and the sky was clear enough to see stars. Can I ask you something? Elena said. Always. Do you ever feel guilty about being happy? Lucas was quiet for a moment. Yeah, sometimes. Me too. Elena pulled the blanket tighter around herself. I spent so long being miserable with David that sometimes I don't know what to do with feeling good, like I'm waiting for something to go wrong. I get that. Does it ever go away? Lucas looked up at the stars. I don't know, but I think maybe it gets easier. You just have to let yourself believe you deserve it. Elena rested her head on his shoulder. I'm trying. Me too. They sat there for a long time, not talking, just being. And Lucas realized something. Healing wasn't about forgetting the past. It wasn't about moving on like nothing had happened. It was about learning to carry it without letting it crush you. It was about building something new without tearing down what came before. Sarah would always be part of him. That wasn't something he needed to fix or hide. And Elena understood that. She didn't ask him to choose between his past and his future. She just asked him to make room for both. And for the first time in 3 years, Lucas felt like he could. Spring turned into summer. Lucas's business picked up, and he started taking on bigger clients. Elena got a job offer, remote work for a marketing firm in the city, good pay, flexible hours. She didn't have to move, didn't have to uproot her life. She could stay. She told Lucas over dinner one night, and his face broke into a smile. You're staying? I'm staying. Jamie, who'd been pushing peas around his plate, looked up. Does that mean you're not leaving? Elena looked at him. Not if you don't want me to. Jamie's face lit up. I don't want you to. Then I won't. Lucas reached across the table and took Elena's hand. She smiled at him, and he felt something settle deep in his chest. This was real. This was happening, and it was terrifying and amazing and exactly what he needed. But not everything was smooth. There were hard days. Days when Elena woke up from nightmares about David. Days when Lucas pulled back without meaning to, overwhelmed by the fear of losing someone again. Days when Jamie asked questions about his mom that Lucas didn't know how to answer. One night, Jamie came out of his room long after bedtime. Lucas was on the couch with Elena, half asleep, when he heard the soft padding of feet. Dad? Lucas sat up. Hey, buddy, what's wrong? Jamie stood in the doorway, clutching his dinosaur. I had a bad dream. Come here. Jamie climbed onto the couch between them. Lucas wrapped an arm around him, and Elena shifted to make room. What was the dream about? Lucas asked gently. Jamie was quiet for a moment, then he said, Mom. Lucas's chest tightened. What about her? I don't remember what she looks like anymore. Lucas felt Elena's hand on his back, steadying him. He took a breath. That's okay, Jamie. But I don't want to forget her. You won't, I promise. Lucas pulled his son closer. You know how sometimes you remember things not by what they look like, but by how they made you feel? Jamie nodded. That's how you'll remember Mom. By how much she loved you, by the way she made you laugh, by the stories I tell you about her. Lucas paused. And I'll keep telling you those stories as long as you need to hear them. Jamie sniffled. Can you tell me one now? Lucas glanced at Elena. She nodded, her eyes soft. Lucas looked back at Jamie. Okay. Did I ever tell you about the time your mom tried to make pancakes and set off the smoke alarm? Jamie shook his head. Well, it was before you were born. She wanted to surprise me with breakfast, but she forgot to turn the heat down. The pancakes burned, the smoke alarm went off, and the dog, remember Biscuit, ran around the house barking like crazy. Jamie giggled. What did you do? I came running downstairs thinking the house was on fire. And there was your mom, standing in the kitchen with a spatula covered in flour, trying to wave the smoke away with a towel. Was she mad? Nah. She was laughing so hard she could barely breathe, and then we ordered takeout and ate it on the floor because the kitchen was a disaster. Lucas smiled. That's how your mom was. She could turn anything into an adventure. Jamie was quiet, processing. Then he said, I like that story. Good. I've got 100 more. Jamie yawned and leaned against Lucas. Within minutes, he was asleep. Elena helped Lucas carry him back to bed, and when they returned to the living room, Lucas collapsed onto the couch. You okay? Elena asked. Lucas nodded. Yeah, that was hard. Elena sat beside him. You handled it really well. I don't know. I feel like I'm making it up as I go. That's what parenting is. Elena took his hand. And for what it's worth, I think you're doing an amazing job. Lucas looked at her. You're good with him. He makes it easy. No, I mean it. You're good with him, and he loves you. I can see it. Elena's eyes filled with tears. I love him too. Lucas pulled her into his arms. Thank you. For what? For being here. For not running when things got hard. For loving us even when we're a mess. Elena held him tighter. You're not a mess, you're just human. Lucas closed his eyes. Maybe she was right. Maybe they were all just figuring it out as they went. And maybe that was okay. The turning point came in late August. Lucas and Elena had been together for nearly 6 months. They'd talked about the future in vague terms, what they wanted, where they saw themselves, but nothing concrete. Lucas had been hesitant to push, afraid of moving too fast, but Elena had been patient, never demanding more than he could give. One evening, after Jamie went to bed, Elena brought it up. I've been thinking, she said. Lucas looked up from his laptop. About what? About us. About where this is going. Lucas's stomach tightened. Okay. Elena sat down beside him. I don't need you to have all the answers, but I need to know if you see a future with me, because I see one with you, with both of you. Lucas closed his laptop. Elena, I'm not asking you to propose. I'm not asking you to rush into anything. I just need to know if we're on the same page. Lucas looked at her, at the woman who'd crashed into his life literally and turned everything upside down. The woman who'd made him laugh again, made him hope again, made him believe that maybe he didn't have to carry the weight of the past alone. I see a future with you, Lucas said quietly. I do. But I'm scared. Of what? Of screwing this up, of losing you, of letting Jamie get too attached, and then he stopped. I've lost before, Elena, and I don't know if I can survive it again. Elena took his hands. Lucas, I can't promise nothing bad will ever happen. I can't promise we won't fight or struggle or have hard days, but I can promise I'm not going anywhere, not unless you tell me to. Lucas's throat tightened. I don't want you to go. Then I won't. Lucas pulled her close, and she wrapped her arms around him. They stayed like that for a long time, and Lucas felt something shift inside him. The fear didn't disappear, but it didn't control him anymore. Because Elena was right. Love wasn't about guarantees, it was about choosing each other every single day, even when it was hard. 2 months later, Lucas made a decision. He talked to Jamie first. They were sitting at the kitchen table working on homework when Lucas said, Hey buddy, can I ask you something? Jamie looked up from his math worksheet. What? How would you feel if Elena moved in with us? Jamie's eyes went wide. Like, lived here? Yeah. Jamie thought about it. Then he grinned. That'd be cool. Lucas smiled. Yeah? Yeah. She makes good pancakes, and she's funny, and she doesn't make me eat vegetables when I don't want to. Lucas laughed. She definitely does make you eat vegetables. Yeah, but she's nicer about it. Lucas ruffled his son's hair up. Okay, good to know. That weekend, Lucas asked Elena to dinner, not at home, but at a restaurant. He hired a babysitter for Jamie and picked Elena up at 7. She looked beautiful, dressed in a simple blue dress, her hair down, a nervous smile on her face. What's the occasion? She asked as they drove. Can a guy take his girlfriend to dinner? Elena raised an eyebrow. You're up to something. Lucas just smiled. They ate and talked and laughed, and when dessert came, Lucas reached across the table and took her hand. Elena, I need to tell you something. Her smile faltered. Okay. I've spent the last 3 years convinced I'd never feel this way again. that I'd lost my chance at happiness, and that was just how it was going to be. He paused. And then you crashed into my life. Literally. Elena laughed, tears already forming in her eyes. And you've made me believe in second chances. You've made Jamie believe in them. You've made us a family again. Lucas squeezed her hand. So I'm not asking you to marry me, not yet. But I am asking if you'll move in with us. If you'll let us do this for real. Elena's tears spilled over. Are you serious? Yeah, I'm serious. Elena laughed through her tears. Yes, of course I will. Lucas stood, pulled her into his arms, and kissed her. And for the first time in years, he felt whole. Elena moved in 2 weeks later. It was chaotic, boxes everywhere, furniture that didn't quite fit, Jamie running around trying to help and mostly getting in the way. But it was also perfect. Because it was theirs. That first night, after everything was unpacked and Jamie was asleep, Lucas and Elena stood in the kitchen, exhausted and happy. We did it, Elena said. Yeah, we did. Elena looked around. It's not much. It's everything. She looked at him, and Lucas saw the same thing in her eyes that he felt in his chest. Gratitude. Hope. Love. Thank you, Elena said. For what? For taking a chance on me. For letting me in. For making me part of this. She gestured to the apartment, to the life they were building. I didn't think I'd ever have this. A home. A family. Someone who actually sees me. Lucas pulled her close. I see you. And I'm not letting go. Elena kissed him, slow and soft, and Lucas felt the last of his walls crumble. This was real. This was happening, and he wasn't afraid anymore. The months that followed weren't perfect. There were arguments about stupid things, whose turn it was to do the dishes, how to discipline Jamie, whether they should get a dog. There were moments when Lucas pulled away, when the guilt crept back in. And there were moments when Elena doubted herself, when the shadow of her past made her question if she deserved this. But they worked through it, because that's what love was. Not the absence of problems, but the choice to face them together. 1 year after the crash, Lucas took Elena back to the mountain. It was a clear day in late winter, the kind where the sky was so blue it almost hurt to look at. They hiked up to the cabin, the one that had saved their lives, and stood outside looking at the sagging roof and broken door. I can't believe we survived in there, Elena said. Lucas put his arm around her. We're tougher than we look. Elena leaned into him. Do you ever think about what would have happened if you hadn't been there that day? Yeah, all the time. Me too. She looked up at him. I think about how close I came to dying, and then I think about everything that's happened since, and I realize that sometimes the worst moments lead to the best ones. Lucas kissed the top of her head. I love you. I love you too. They stood there for a while, just holding each other before heading back down the mountain. When they got home, Jamie was waiting with Claire. He ran to Elena first, hugging her tight, and Lucas watched with a full heart. This was his family now. Imperfect, patched together, built on the wreckage of their pasts. But it was his, and it was enough. That night, after Jamie went to bed, Lucas and Elena sat on the couch, her head on his shoulder, his arm around her waist. Do you think we'll always be this happy? Elena asked. Lucas thought about it. I think we'll have good days and bad days, but yeah, I think we will. Why? Because we chose this, and we keep choosing it, every single day. Elena smiled. I like that answer. Lucas held her closer, and they sat in comfortable silence, watching the world outside their window. And Lucas realized something he'd been too afraid to admit until now. Healing wasn't about forgetting. It wasn't about moving on. It was about learning to carry your scars without letting them define you. It was about opening yourself up to the possibility of joy, even when you'd been broken before. It was about believing that love, real, messy, imperfect love, was worth the risk. Because in the end, the people who save you aren't always the ones you expect. Sometimes they're strangers in a snowstorm. Sometimes they're second chances disguised as car crashes. Sometimes they're the ones who see you at your worst and choose to stay anyway. And sometimes, if you're lucky, they become the reason you believe in tomorrow. Lucas looked at Elena, then at the photo of Sarah on the mantle, then back at Elena. He didn't have to choose between the past and the future anymore. He could honor both. He could love both. and he could finally let himself be happy. "Thank you," he whispered into Elena's hair. "For what?" "For not giving up on me." Elena lifted her head and looked at him. "Never." And in that moment, Lucas knew this was it. This was home. Not a place, but a feeling, a choice, a promise to keep showing up, even when it was hard. They'd both been lost once, broken, running from the things that hurt too much to face. But somehow, in that cabin on a frozen mountain, they'd found each other. And in finding each other, they'd found their way back to themselves. It wasn't a perfect ending. It wasn't a fairy tale. But it was real. And that made it worth everything.